Have you ever noticed how over the past decade or so, we've been bombarded with claims from the mainstream media is the hottest on record, and the media floods the public with colour-coded heat maps, the red, amber, green, warning of extreme temperatures and impending climate catastrophe. And every time, it's used to reinforce the government's aggressive push towards net zero. If you've ever felt like that something doesn't quite add up with that, you're not alone. Now, for those who already know and have seen the title of this video, probably will say once again to me, well, imagine my shock, or I'm not shocked at all, this is to be expected. I know. But there are still a lot of people within this country that haven't seen this sort of data. I have concrete evidence showing that the temperature data driving these headlines and underpinning the net zero policy itself is deeply flawed and in many cases potentially outright false. Last month, I sent 2 requests to the Met Office, Britain's weather forecaster, and I asked whether the Met Office had carried out any internal reports, audits or assessments from 2015 onward about the impact of poor sighted temperature stations on UK temperature data, what methods or procedures the Met Office uses to adjust or account for sighting related bias in temperature readings. The other request is a complete list of all UK land-based temperature stations with their official WMO, that's the World Meteorological Organisation, by the United Nations, citing classifications 1 to 5, and the most recent assessment date for each station. Now, this is all about how accurate UK temperature data really is, and especially when the data is used to shape not only climate policy such as net zero, but to media headlines and public perception. For those who don't know this, not all temperature stations are equal. Some are in clean, rural open spaces, which is ideal. Others are surrounded by concrete or buildings, car parks, air conditioning units or reflective glass, urban heat sources like roads or airports. And these are called poorly sighted stations, and they're given a lower classification by the World Meteorological Organisation, or WMO, specifically classes 3, 4 or 5. Poorly sighted stations are known to record higher temperatures than they should due to nearby heat sources. And if lots of these are used in national averages to record temperature, it could artificially inflate the UK's recorded climate trend. The Met Office provided me with a spreadsheet listing all active land-based temperature stations in the UK, along with their station names or identifiers, general locations, their WMO sighting classification from 1 to 5, the date the classification was last reviewed, giving me one of the most concrete admissions of sighting quality in the UK monitoring network. Out of 389 stations in total, class 1 and 2, which is ideal or good for temperature data monitoring, only 49 stations fall into this category. On class 3, which is acceptable but bias, you have 28 stations. And in class 4, 4S, 5 and 5S, poor to unreliable, a whopping 312 stations fall under these categories combined. That means that over 80% of UK land-based temperature stations are in locations that are likely to distort the data. And I now have the evidence, shockingly, that they do not hold any internal reviews or audits specifically looking at whether these low-quality stations are distorting national temperature averages, how much hotter these stations might be reading compared to well-placed ones, and whether climate trends are being skewed. This is a serious admission from the Met Office. It means that the UK hasn't formally looked into whether poor station quality is biasing the climate data, cross-referencing it from previous national records 4 out of 5 record holding stations are class 3 or worse. The 2019 national record at Cambridge Botanic Garden, recorded 38.7 degrees, was set at a class 5 station, the worst possible classification, deemed unreliable by the Met Office's own standards. And the 2022 all-time UK high in Coningsby at 40.3 degrees came from a class 3 station, one where heat bias is explicitly expected. Like I said, many of you guys who have looked into this and looked into net zero a bit more closely and how we record temperatures, even at places like airports or rooftops or on tarmacs, these are the same policies and the same data being used to justify net zero and being pushed through Parliament. And the media just seems to just run with it and doesn't bother investigating this. It doesn't shock me. It's actually to be expected by the mainstream media now. But it's still to see the evidence, once again, like my previous reports on various other FOI requests, it's still incredibly shocking. The fact that there is so much oversight and having the Met Office admit it back to me. On my Substack, you can read through the data yourself. I've got the raw data for you and any screenshots provided and all the information for you to sleuth yourself, so you don't have to just take my word for it. So now that we have this information and it's out there for the public to see, what do we do next? Where is it that we go from here with regards to this? Well, we now know that net zero policy is using this data, like I've said, from the Met Office, which is completely unreliable. So government ministers now have to be aware of this and correct this, because it is misinformation. But also, I've fired off more requests to explicitly explain how these poorly placed temperature stations, specifically those ranked class 3, 4 or 5 in their official UK climate dataset, called HadUK-Grid, whether they adjust or filter the data from these flawed stations, whether any internal audits or quality checks have ever been done on this issue, not just from 2014 onwards, but also how much of the national temperature record is influenced by biased or unreliable stations. I've asked now how that flawed data is actually being used in the data sets that shape the government climate policy, media narratives, and public perception of extreme weather. If no safeguards or understanding is in place, it means that the UK's most important climate data sets may be systematically compromised by design. Essentially, I'm asking, you've known about this for years, so what are you doing about it? But this is serious, genuinely serious. And like I posted originally on X when I came across this data and I was sent it today, I realised this could break the lid and shake the foundations of how the public, not people that are extremely sceptical of net zero as it is, but how people that are pro net zero and the wider public will view this going forward. And whether or not it helps bolster the case that we should not be going anywhere near net zero. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again in another video.